Welcome to SEC Fan Talk, the show by SEC fans for SEC fans, and your home for all SEC stats, scores, schedules, and news. Want to be a guest host? Sign up today at secfantalk.com. And now for your hosts, Luke Alsop and Brandon Bird. What a fantastic week we had in week 1 of SEC play. Now moving into week 2. Is there going to be upsets? Is there going to be triumphs? Sure there is. We're here to talk about them. As always, you have myself, Brandon Bird, with Mr. Luke Alsop, and today our first special guest host signed up from secfantalk.com, Mr. Brad Rush.
What's up, fellas?
Bradley.
Welcome to the show, Brad.
SEC football, the only conference that matters, and it's played in God's country. What more can you have?
That is exactly right, sir.
Our rundown's pretty simple today. We're going to hit a little bit of the SEC news, go through the schedule, make our picks, hit the predictions, maybe a little bit of the bet lines, and that's all she wrote. So, guys, getting straight into this thing, the only SEC news this week, no one has really come out and added anything of COVID and tracing and all this other. The only big news that we've seen come out is that Cade Mays' interconference transfer from Georgia to Tennessee has been approved by Mr. Sankey, as well as Mr. Joey Gatewoods from Auburn to Kentucky. Now, guys, I'd like to get your input on this. Interconference transfers, should they have to sit out a year? Does it change depending on what grade level you're at? If you're a sophomore, do you sit? If you, of course, the graduate transfer gets to go without harm. But it seems like Sankey can bend the rules when need be, or if there's a lawsuit brought up or the appeal makes sense. NCAA approves it, and then SEC has to sit on it for 2 more weeks and make a kid who's busted his butt off all summer sit and watch his team the first week. Do we make any changes to this?
Well, just personally for me, I think that rule is ridiculous. If these kids want to transfer to another school, they should be able to do that without sitting out a year. Now, part of me is kind of apprehensive about that because if a kid is going to transfer from one school to a rival school that is in the same division, then I can see where the team that he originally signed for is not going to want to sign off on that. So, I just hate the idea that the kid's got to sit a year before he can see the field.
No, see, I can agree with that, but I think it should be more like a case-by-case basis on that.
Yeah, that's true.
I with you, I don't agree with, say, the star receiver from Alabama's not, doesn't like the coaching staff or something, but he's their best offensive threat, transfers to Auburn the next year. I don't think that's how it should work. Obviously, I think playing time should be involved. If the kid has, they set a limit of, if you take more than 150 snaps that season or whatever the case may be, you have to sit out the next year if you're going to transfer.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I think they set a cap on that.
Yeah, or they could actually set a cap on, if you do transfer to a rival school in the same division, that you can only play so many times. You can only play so many downs or
minutes or whatever.
Yeah, minutes or whatever.
Or you instead of sitting the whole first year, you just sit that game for that rival, and the rest of the time, maybe some limitations on some other games. If in Cade May's situation, if you're in the East, limit some play at times, and you don't play at all against Georgia.
Yeah.
No, I could agree with that too. I just don't like the idea of it becoming more like the pros where they trade players all willy-nilly like.
Right.
If your best player plays for Kentucky, gets a call from Nick Saban, he's going to transfer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So much for the news. Hey, no news is good news. We're not talking about
injuries or anything
the
like
SEC.
that.
Yeah, the SEC didn't have a humongous amount of outbreak of COVID and have to shut down for a couple weeks.
Hey, well, I will say, as far as the news is concerned, that Cade Mays and Joey Gatewood are going to make immediate impacts for the teams that they just transferred to.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Before we move on to the schedule, let's talk about another big piece of news is that in the top 25, narrow that down to the top 4, we have currently, after 1 week of SEC play, 3 SEC teams in the top 4.
Yeah, well, everything has not been right with the world this year, but that seems like it is right with the world when you have 3 SEC teams in the top 4.
I completely agree. The only downfall to this season, I'm all for all SEC all the time, but when it gets down to playoff time, you have went through a gauntlet of a schedule. You're beaten up by the time you get to the 14 playoff.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
And we said at the beginning of this season that if there is a year for the SEC to have, we've had the years with 2 SEC teams in the Final Four, and if there is a year for 3, this would be the year.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably going to shape up that way. I don't know, with Ohio State now into the mix, they're going to have to make an argument. But yeah, like Brad said, it's whoever, somebody in the SEC is going to have literally the hardest schedule in the history of college football, and it might be Texas A&M. But no matter who it is, every team's got to run through this just meat grinder of a schedule.
Yep, you are exactly right. I mean, I agree with that too. Texas A&M is going to have a hard time. Tennessee always has a hard time playing Alabama every year, and these teams in the West have got their feelers out, seeing that Mississippi State means business this year as well. So they're always on the back burner for that too.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of toughest schedule, let's hit into the SEC Week 2 schedule. We'll just run these down with teams and times. First off, a couple of noon games. First one, South Carolina, coming off of a loss, playing at Florida, number 3 Florida, that is, against Kyle Trask and company. The other noon game is the Missouri at Tennessee. Missouri coming off the loss with Tennessee on the win. The 3:30 prime game is the number 13 Texas A&M against number 2 Alabama, and of course CBS has that one picked up. The 4 o'clock game, Ole Miss and Kentucky. The first 7:30 game, Auburn at Georgia, also Arkansas and Mississippi State, as well as LSU at Vanderbilt. Guys, it is going to be a fantastic Saturday.
Yes, it is. It's I mean, there's a few huge games in there. I mean, I'm really excited to see the Missouri-Tennessee game. Really excited for all of them, really, but especially Tennessee. I'm excited for the A&M Alabama game, and Georgia and Auburn is probably going to be the game of the day.
Yep, no, I agree. Tennessee, Missouri. I think that might be a sneaky good game. You got to see that Missouri played pretty well in the second half against Alabama. I mean, it is Alabama's second string. For the short period of time Missouri has been in the SEC, Tennessee's had some problems with that. I mean, they are a total of 1-3 against Missouri all time in the SEC. So, I mean, that's not a very big sample size, but still yet. Hate week, Auburn, Georgia, that's always a good game. I don't know if Bo Nix has it. He's got a little Brett Favre-esque in him, but I don't trust him. I mean, Kentucky's a good team, but they're not Georgia. Georgia will really show where their weaknesses are. And then, like Luke said, Texas A&M, Alabama. That's a big game. A&M's going to really have to put on their big boy pants to play Alabama, but I am definitely pulling for Texas A&M because I would pull for the devil before I would Alabama.
Let's run these down and talk about these games individually. First one we mentioned with South Carolina and Florida. So Florida had a tremendous offensive blowout week last week with Kyle Trask and his wide receiver / offensive lineman / tight end, whatever he wants to play, Mr. Pitt. Unfortunately, Florida's defense gave up over 600 yards as well. How do they fare against South Carolina?
I mean, I think they're going to dominate South Carolina from beginning to end. The offense is going to be fine. I mean, if they show up half as much as they did last week, they can still beat South Carolina. Their defense is the topic of discussion in Gainesville. Kyer Ingram, he took it personally about how bad they looked last Saturday and how many yards they gave up to Ole Miss. I think that's kind of it's just criticism, but at the same time, Ole Miss last year, surprisingly enough, they put up 37 points against LSU last year, and that was a pretty hard-fought game for LSU. Besides the Florida game, it was the most hard-fought game that they had all season. You can and they had 4 starters out, which is definitely going to hinder your defense. But yeah, I think Florida will run away with this game. I don't think it's going to be close at any point.
So you don't think it's going to look like a Pac-12 full offensive game, because when it comes to South Carolina, stopping Shi Smith is extremely hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, Shi Smith is by far the best player on that offense. He's one of the best offensive players in the East. So yeah, they're going to have to contain him. I just think that they're going to be chomping at the bit to prove that they are nowhere near as bad as they were last Saturday.
Yeah, coming into this game, Kyle Trask last game, 416 yards, 6 TDs. That's a pretty good outing. I don't know if he's going to hang 416 yards up against South Carolina. And I think that actually Colin Hill, the transfer for coming into South Carolina, is actually going to give Florida's defense a little trouble. He got a little feel of the SEC last week against Tennessee. He's a pro-style quarterback. He's got a heck of an arm. Obviously, his weapons are not as good as some teams. But I think that he's going to surprise a lot of people this week. I'm not saying that South Carolina wins. I'm not saying they even keep it that close. But I think they're going to surprise you and put some points up on the board against that Florida defense that showed some cracks last week.
Well, Brad, who is your pick for that game?
We talking score? I mean, obviously, I picked Florida for sure. I mean, I'm thinking it's going to be 45-21, somewhere in that ballpark range. I mean, almost doubling South Carolina. But like I said, I still think they'll put up some yards. But a lot of turnovers as well, maybe, by South Carolina Gamecocks.
Yeah, I think that score is probably pretty spot on. I would almost say the exact same score. I think that's very, very fair. And, I think that South Carolina could cover that 18-point spread going into, the fourth quarter or even later. But I think Florida will end up they'll end up covering that spread by the time the clock hits 0.
I'm going to choose Florida as well, but I'm going to lower it down 35-14. It is probably my choice to be a potential upset on it. Florida's going to come in, hey, look at what we did last week. And South Carolina they've watched their film. They saw where they messed up. Tennessee and South Carolina game is always close. Every year except for last year. We've said that multiple times. South Carolina, had it not been for the pick six that they put on the transfer quarterback, South Carolina would have won that game. So they grow into this week, and I think they give Florida a little bit more that they could be a potential upset. So I still think Florida will win. I just I don't know about an 18-point spread.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, like I said last week, I mean, it's South Carolina. They have this uncanny ability to make their opposing team play the worst game that they're going to play all season, or just not look as good as they normally look. And it's just a thing that Muschamp has at South Carolina. For Florida's sake, they better hope that they don't take South Carolina lightly, because they could be looking at an upset or just barely squeaking by, which when you're an 18-point favorite could be it's almost as bad as losing if you
drop rankings.
Right, exactly. If Florida can't afford to have that happen,
which is what we saw with Tennessee.
Right. Yeah, Florida just can't afford to let that happen. They've got the playoffs in their sights this year, so any slip up is not going to be good for them.
Speaking of Tennessee, our second game is Tennessee with hosting their home opener with Missouri coming to town. So Tennessee did drop from 16 to 21 after the win against South Carolina. Missouri with a new head coach and Tennessee with a lot of returning seniors. I think their senior count is 25. Do they handle business in a very, very positive way in Knoxville this weekend? Brad, we'll start with you.
I think so. Missouri is definitely rebuilding. Ever since they've been in the SEC, they've been a shocker in the East, which the East is down, has been for the past couple years. With their new coach, I can't think of his name, but from Appalachian State, coming in, switching it up, trying to make it more offensively focused compared to defense. I think Garantano is going to actually have a bounce-back game. I think they've probably worked on the field some. I mean, that's the first time out, right? I mean, he's going to have some issues. He's never been the superstar quarterback. I mean, he's just been the guy that's going to get you through. I would like to see him run a little bit more. He is supposed to be dual threat. I mean, he hasn't shown it, but I would like to see him run a little bit more. I definitely think that this is going to be a bounce back. Lack of a better term, bounce back game for the University of Tennessee. I think they actually played pretty well, and it's not even close in the home opener in Knoxville this week.
I would love that. It's almost like you listened to our episode of Tennessee Fan Talk. We talked about Garantano and the ability that he does have, but he did not show last week. It was overthrow, behind, couldn't get it to his receivers consistently at all. And I really feel like we were misled in his rankings as a quarterback when Tennessee recruited him, because he was sold as a dual threat quarterback, and Josh Dobbs looks 10 times better than he does in Knoxville as far as running the ball.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. The nickname Garrett Overthrowing Tano came out, but like I said, I think they're going to stick a little bit more to the ground game. It's going to be a little chilly in Knoxville. I don't know if it's supposed to rain, but I think that they'll really pound the ball down their throat, maybe even see a couple fullback sets. Play action pass is going to be the move this weekend, I feel.
So we know Brad has said at Tennessee. What about a prediction on the score?
I believe this one's going to be 35-10. I have a lot of faith in Tennessee defense this week.
They looked fantastic last week, and we'll be looking to add on to their already esteemed amount of accomplishments. Luke, what about you?
I like Tennessee in this game. Missouri, they had a respectable showing against Alabama last week. Seeing as I don't really follow Missouri that closely, I can't really speak to the specifics of, what their running game is going to look like. But Missouri has always been able to put up points against teams, and they've always been able to beat teams that they shouldn't necessarily beat. This is going to be a big test for Eli Drinkwitz. I think if Barry Odom was still in Missouri, I think I would take Missouri to at least cover the spread. I would take Tennessee regardless. But I think this game's going to be fairly close. I mean, I think it could be a 32 to 21 game, somewhere around that lines. But I think Missouri will be able to keep it close, but Tennessee pulls it out in the end.
I agree with you. I do think that Tennessee will pull it out. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say 28-21, just because of the unknowns. Tennessee's ability to score in the red zone is almost non-existent. I think their defense makes a couple stops, and of that 28 points, I think the defense puts up 6 of them, which will move us into our next game with the primetime game of the week, number 13, Texas A&M at number 2, Alabama. What an exciting matchup. We said in preseason that Texas is growing stronger. Kyle Field is an exciting place to play. They are gaining more momentum in the recruiting battle in a very, very big state and big region. where they really only have to battle with a couple other teams. And it may not be this year, but in coming years, they're liable to take the West. Luke, how do you feel about Texas A&M and Alabama game?
I'm not feeling too good about it, to be honest with you. Texas A&M, I had such high hopes for them at the beginning of the season. I thought, this was going to be Kellen Mond's year. He'd been under Jimbo Fisher's wing now for a couple of seasons. But man, after the way they played against Vanderbilt, there is just no excuse in that. Like I said, they put the ball on the ground 5 times in that game. If they do that twice against Alabama, the game's over. They can't afford, they won't survive having 2 turnovers or more against an Alabama defense at Alabama. I really thought going into the season that A&M really had a good chance of beating Alabama, but after last week, I just can't make that argument anymore. And after the way they played against Vanderbilt, A&M is lucky that the spread is only 17.5 points. Now I'm looking for A&M to bounce back, and they're going to look better than they did last week. That's for sure. But I still have Alabama all the way in this game.
As Tennessee fans, Brad and I both know, and this is to help Texas A&M out. Brad and I both know that Vanderbilt is not someone whom you just take lightly. Now, while they are not a powerhouse of the SEC, and we've already joked about how they don't spend their money on their facilities, but Derek Mason's defense is not one to play around with. That they are good against the rush. They, if you go in underestimating them, they will beat you. And I think that Texas A&M did that. I don't think that they prepared to go in, thinking this is the first game of the season. Vanderbilt's not going to have it together. It's just Vanderbilt. And it looked ugly. And so hopefully, they were just mistaken in their preparation, and that they cannot mistake for this game. Brad, how do you feel about the game?
I think there's going to be one deciding factor if Texas A&M wants to have a chance to win this game. His name's Kellen Mond, senior quarterback. He has shown flashes before. He can really spin it. He's pretty good with his legs too. He's going to have to make good decisions, make sure that they don't, get too excited. They don't want to come into this game and get too pumped up. Alabama's starting a new quarterback, but, new quarterback on the year, Mac Jones. Nick Saban always has his guys ready. The quarterback at Alabama has never really been the big statement anyway, except for, maybe Tua. I think it's going to be closer than what people think. But I still think Alabama. It's going to be an entertaining game, but I think Alabama definitely pulls it out.
You both could be right. You guys both could be right. Texas A&M, they could have just been ignoring Vanderbilt leading up to the opening week. They could have had their eyes set on Alabama on that second game. From as soon as they released the schedule. So, they might have not even taken Vanderbilt seriously and, just been looking towards Alabama, and then things caught up with them, but we'll see.
And that Jimbo chewed that hind end out too.
Oh, yes, he did.
I'm definitely going to go Alabama. I'm going to say, I'm gonna go 48-28, and the reason that I give Alabama up to 48 points is Mac Jones, while he is no Tua on his feet, he has got an arm, and he proved last week that he could put the ball wherever he wants to in tight places, and put the trust in his receivers, and that they're going to be where they're supposed to be, and that the ball's in the window every time.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be a Heisman Trophy quarterback to take them to the playoffs. I mean, the weapons that they have. I mean, Waddle, he's the best receiver in the conference and probably the best receiver in college football this year. That guy is just
Agreed.
unbelievable. And Najee Harris is just, that kid is just he looks like, he almost looks like an old, I don't know, Adrian Peterson or something out there. I mean, the guy's he's just incredible.
Missouri couldn't stop them last week. I mean, they stopped everyone else, but Najee, there was no stopping the Najee train last week.
Nope. But I mean, but
final
what I
score for that?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Final score, I'm thinking 42-21 Alabama. I think they keep it close. I think A&M keeps it close in the first half, but then going into the second half, Alabama's going to just wear them out on the ground and pull away in the fourth.
Luke?
I'm going to say 41-28 Alabama. I think that A&M going into for three quarters, I think A&M is going to be able to at least keep the game respectable, and there's going to be times where you think that A&M is actually going to have a chance to either tie or pull ahead to Alabama halfway through the game, but Alabama will do what Alabama does.
That finishes that one up. The 4:00 game, Ole Miss at Kentucky. It'd be on the SEC network. Not much to say for either one on that. For me, I think Kentucky takes this game. Maybe not by much. It may be a field goal, just a field goal win on it. They looked pretty good last week. Stayed within 2 points multiple times during the game. As we said at the beginning of the week show, Wilson kind of just literally handed it over in the third quarter, and they just could not recover from that.
I think this is going to be a heck of a game. I don't know. I mean, Ole Miss played so well offensively against Florida last week, that Ole Miss is going to be able to score points on Kentucky. I mean, that's just a fact. Kentucky's secondary is pretty dang good, though, so I will give that to them. But I'm actually going to call an upset here to say that Ole Miss pulls it out. I think it's going to be kind of an ugly game, but I'm thinking like 24-21 Ole Miss.
No, I agree 100% with Luke on this. Lane Kiffin's offense, where it's nowhere near Mississippi State's from what we can see so far, is still a really good offense. I mean, Ole Miss has a receiver by the name of Elijah Moore, who is a beast. Last game, 10 receptions, 227 yards. No TDs, but still yet. I think Ole Miss hangs it up on Kentucky. I think they run it fast. I think it's just going to be – I think it's going to be a higher scoring game. I just think they just keep going, score. Lane Kiffin, like I said, his offense has always been good, anywhere from the NFL to even when he coached at University of Tennessee. Offense was much better. I'm thinking the score's 35-28 Ole Miss. I really think they hang some points up this week.
Yeah, I could see that.
I'm going to have the same score as Luke picked with the 24-21, except for I'm picking it in favor of Kentucky.
Oh, you're going with the Wildcats, huh?
I think they have a little bit of bone to pick after last week, and they show up and show out.
I mean, it's very possible. I mean, Terry Wilson, the kid is a tremendous athlete, and he had to knock some cobwebs off. But yeah, he should be ready to roll Saturday. So, who knows? But if they don't get their turnovers under control, then Ole Miss will run away with this.
Speaking of potential runaways, our next game, the 7:30, number 7 Auburn at number 4 Georgia on ESPN. Guys, this one's going to be a fun one to watch as well. The way that Georgia started out last week, if they start out again this week like that, Auburn's going to hurt them. Now, if they roll in with what they did the second half of that game, it could very well be a easy Georgia win. Luke, what are your thoughts on that?
It depends on what. I guess JT Barrett, or is it JT Daniels? Georgia's new quarterback transfer.
Stinson Bennett.
He is probably going to get the keys to the offense. They've been waiting on him, so we'll get a look to see what he is like coming out of the gate. If Auburn can consistently move the ball, they're going to be fine. And I'm actually going to pick Auburn to win this game. Now, I don't know if that's just wishful thinking on my part by being a Florida fan, but I am hoping that Auburn pulls this one out. And they've got a chance to do that because if Georgia looks like they did last week in that first half, if they do that in the first half against Auburn could get a 21-0 on them pretty quick, because as inconsistent as Auburn's offense is under Matt Zahn, Bo Nix, they can score some points. So Georgia better be ready to play come Saturday.
So Auburn for Luke, what type of score are you thinking Auburn's going to pull out?
I'm thinking 28-24 Auburn.
All right, Bradley, what about you?
I agree that it's going to be a great game. I think that Luke's off on the score. I think that Georgia's definitely going to pull it out. I do think that Bo Nix, I think he has that gene that makes him a winner. He's going to give it his all every down. But I think that Georgia came out the gates a little slow last week, like a couple teams did on their back foot. And I think that they really worked on that this week. Like I said, Stinson Bennett, I think he's the guy they've really been looking for. They've always been a pocket passing offense. They've never really had that quarterback that runs around too much. That was a pretty good outing to come off the bench, not getting the start. He definitely has the start this week, I'm sure. Like I said, I think it's going to be good, but I definitely think it's going to come down to a fourth quarter touchdown by the Bulldogs to win.
What do you say final score?
Yeah, I guess I broke up there. Yeah, final score, I got the Georgia Bulldogs, like I said, late fourth quarter touchdown, 28-21, Dogs.
Boy, I hope you're wrong about that one, Brad. that would be like a dagger in the heart if Georgia pulled it out late in the fourth quarter.
Well, you can never tell. They've been known to let it go in the fourth quarter.
As much as it pains me to say that I do not want Georgia climbing any more ladders in the East. When Bennett come in, it was a completely different game. I'm going to have to go 24-21 Georgia. Our next game is Arkansas and Mississippi State, coming off a big win last week for Mississippi State. What do they do to Arkansas?
Arkansas is going to have a long day. If Mississippi State can do anything like they did last week, they're just gonna take Arkansas behind the woodshed. But who knows? Maybe LSU is worse than what we thought. Maybe Mississippi State just had a phenomenal game and they don't have another one. I think that's highly unlikely. Mississippi State is, a 17-point favorite in that game. I think they'll cover that spread. I could see this is going to be one of those games that I don't think it's going to be close after midway through the second quarter.
I agree. And before you make your pick there, as you were talking, and I've gone back and watched the highlight reel of the LSU game probably 3 times this week just to go, wow, oh my goodness,
Oh yeah,
I think they blow them out. I think it's Mississippi State 45-14.
That seems pretty spot on. I think I would almost pick that exact same score.
No, I agree too. The only thing that Arkansas has going for them, they got your boy Felipe Frank, Luke.
Yep, he is there in Arkansas, and for 1 out of 5 plays, he looks like the best quarterback in the conference. but the other 4 not so much.
It's just the other 4, yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but they have for a long time. They haven't been relative since maybe the early 2000s. Arkansas stinks. I mean, they just stink.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Mississippi State hung a 50-burger on them. Now, their defense, I mean, the defense couldn't stop a cold. But I could see, I mean, a 50-burger hung up on them easy.
Yeah, and I almost think that it's almost fitting. Like, I don't wish any ill will against any SEC team, but I still can't get over the fact of the way that they did Brett Bielema at Arkansas. I mean, to me, that was absolutely shameful. And so anytime I see them, get beat up pretty badly, it's kind of like, well, I don't think the players deserved it, but your university as a whole, the way they handled that whole situation, I can kind of enjoy them getting the break speed off of them every now and then.
No, I agree. I don't wish any ill will on any of them either, but I do hate Woo Pig Sooie. That is top 5 worst chants, maybe in the United States, definitely in the SEC. But yeah, I don't want to see any ill will, but they're going to get the brakes blown off of them this week for sure. Like I said, 50-burger. I mean, I don't know what, 52-14. Let's go with that. I can see that happening.
Yeah, that's very possible. Very possible.
So speaking of a game that there may be a humongous blowout, the final game, LSU, who has dropped from, what were they, 6th to 20th, and going to Nashville and playing Vanderbilt. Do they make the mistake and not prepare for Vanderbilt, or do they go out there and just rip them up and take out all the frustrations from last week's game?
I don't see it. I think after the way that LSU, I think they're probably so just defeated from getting beat the way they did against Mississippi State that they had a hard week of practice. Ed Orgeron's not going to let their team just hang their heads for the whole rest of the season. So they probably had a rough week of practice, and they're going to come out and they're going to be fired up and they're going to be ready to take it to Vanderbilt.
How bad do they do that?
I don't know. I'm looking. I'm still not convinced of LSU's offense. Brennan is just, he's not the quarterback so far that I've seen that he's been built up to be. I think it could be a 28-7 ball game.
28-7 for Luke. Like I said, with watching the replays and the highlight reel, I mean, LSU was in that game a lot. They were back and forth. It was a very high offense for both teams, and I think they put a little bit more on Vanderbilt, and I'll give Vanderbilt a little bit of something, maybe that they're going to fix something with their offense too, and put the game at 38-21.
See, I think that LSU, after that first loss, it's going to be just the murder tour of 2020. I actually think that Brennan's a little better than what most people think. I mean, his offensive line was terrible last week. Some of those sacks could have been on him not getting rid of the ball quick enough, but 7 sacks in a football game against Mississippi State, that, like I said, they're not known for their defense, especially this year.
No.
But he put up 345 yards, 3 TDs. He did have 2 interceptions, but like I said, he was getting hassled. I also think that coming into this season, it's nothing. Nobody thought it'd be the way it is. Coming up against Mississippi State with a new offense that they didn't have any time to watch any film on. I think Coach Orgeron, in his best Louisianan voice, told Mr. Brenda, "This is your football team, and you're gonna go out there and you're gonna you're gonna win. You're a winner. We're winners." I mean, that's the best. That's the best Ed Orgeron voice I got.
Thank you, ma'am. It's my dream job.
Yeah, we're going to go out there and we're going to eat some gator tail and we're going to throw some touchdowns.
I hear that kid can really pepper the gumbo.
Now, was lucky enough to go to the LSU Vandy game last year, and that was, let's just say, an experience. The LSU fans drank the stadium out of beer at halftime. So
sounds about right.
They did, because we left at halftime too. I think it's going to be a blowout. I think, like I said, I think LSU starts the comeback murder tour. I think it's going to be. I absolutely not going to pick against LSU because my better half is from Louisiana. So
yeah, you can't do that.
I got LSU 35, Vandy 14. Like I said, Ed Orgeron's going to come back. They're going to have a bounce back game this week. LSU is a better football team than what they showed last week.
Well, we have gone through the entire list of Saturday's games. What an exciting week 2 for the SEC it's going to be. Hopefully, everything goes well and we don't have any type of COVID outbreaks or anything. We get to continue this on, and hopefully we see a lot of improvement from week 1 to week 2. Enough improvement to where we could get someone like Notre Dame out of the 5th spot in the AP rankings. And let's not get Luke started on Notre Dame.
Yeah, don't get me started on them. That would have filled up in a whole another 45 minutes of me ranting against my hatred of Notre Dame.
Well, you and 95% of the rest of the United States.
We do appreciate you tuning in to another episode of SEC Fan Talk. We want to say thank you to Brad Rush for being the first to go to secfantalk.com and signing up to be a guest host. We really enjoyed having you on the show. Can't wait to have you back following the week of football to see how our picks worked out and see how these games played out.
Oh, I sure do appreciate the invite. Like I said, yeah. Thank y'all for sure. I had a great time. This is my first time ever doing a podcast. But I appreciate it. Y'all do good stuff. And yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, we enjoyed having you, man. Yeah, definitely need to do this again.
I'll take that as another invite. So yeah, I'll come back.
Absolutely.
Here we go. We thank you again. Please remember to follow us at SEC Fan Talk on Twitter, or go to secfantalk.com. Sign up, join in, get in the conversation. We thank you very much. Enjoy your SEC Week 2 football.
It just means more.